Hello, how are you? Very sun-kissed today. I want to do a quick video and do some mini reviews of the young adult novels that I've been reading recently. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with The Serpent King by Jeff Zentner. This is coming out next week and it's published here in the UK by Penguin Random House. They got in contact with me and I kind of thought when I read the title that this was going to be like a fantasy type book, have a little bit of mythology in there, purely from the title and from this cover, which is really cool. I don't know if you can see, but it's like a snake shedding its skin. Anyway, it's not. It's contemporary YA. It's set in Tennessee, which is nice because I've been to Tennessee, and it's about three 17-year-old friends in their senior year of high school and all those usual kind of anxieties and where am I going and where am I going to be this time next year, and are we all still going to be friends? The three main characters are Dill, Lydia and Travis. Our focus is kind of on Dill, and his father is a pastor. He's like this really unorthodox preacher who, for reasons that I'll not spoil, ends up in prison. So Dill and his mother are really struggling financially, and Dill is really struggling with his reputation, and his name kind of comes before him and people judge him because of that. And it turns out his grandfather had a similar dark path and he really worries that he's going to end up in the same way. His best friend Lydia is a 17-year-old girl, very confident, comes from a sort of richer white kind of middle class background, and she has really good prospects ahead of her because she's a fashion blogger, so she's very popular online and she's all set for college in this glitzy new life, interviewing people and getting free clothes to review and all that good stuff. And Dill is very afraid of losing her. Travis is this lovely, gentle, shy person who's completely caught up in a world of fantasy novels, sort of Game of Thrones-esque novels, and he's obsessed with a writer and spends his days on fan forums, and his relationship with his father is also kind of messy. You get to hear from each of them a chapter at a time. It's all third person, but they sort of take it a chapter about, and you get to know their oh, that's a big cat. Hi. You get to figure out what's going on in their minds. It gets sad. Warning, it gets sad. This book made me cry. It's about friendship. It really is about friendship, but there is a love story towards the end, and thankfully it doesn't dominate too much of the novel. I don't think that's a criticism in the novel. It's just that I didn't really want to read a teenage love story, so I would have preferred it to remain about friendship, but it didn't. I really think you'll enjoy this if you're in and around that age where you're sort of thinking about leaving your own small town behind and all that. This is Jeff Zentner's debut young adult novel. He's a singer-songwriter in Nashville, I believe, which is pretty darn cool. And also I think I talked about trying to read more diversely with young adult fiction sometime last year, and this is a novel about three white teenagers, but they're also very, very aware in the way that I think most teenagers are now about where they're living and who they are, and that the southern states can be very racist, and they reference that a lot. I think he captures the tone of their voices really well, particularly Lydia, the way she writes in her fashion blog and her humour. It's just very, very believable. So I really enjoyed this. This was great. Thank you. Next up, this book is also released at the very, very start of March, so very soon, is Hour of the Beast. This book is by Lindsay Egar. I'm not terribly sure, and it's going to be published by Walker Books, who, as you probably know, are a children's book publisher. So this is more of a children's book than a young adult book, technically, but that's okay. They recommend it for readers aged 11 plus. You know, let's not be too strict about who can read what, but I think if you're a young teenager you'll really enjoy this. Carol is the main character. She's 12 years old and she has to spend her entire summer out in the desert in New Mexico with her mother, her father, her half-sister and her little brother, and her grandfather, who she'd never met in her whole life. They have to go out to his sheep farm because he has dementia and it's getting to a point where he can't live on his own, so her parents are trying to clean up the house and sell it and move him into a residential kind of nursing home where he can receive the care he needs. It's written in first person. It's about 350 pages long. And speaking of diversity, this is a great little novel. Carol she says she is not Mexican, nor is she Mexican American. She just sees herself as an American. Her name is actually Carolina and she doesn't use that, and none of her friends use their Spanish names, and it's just really interesting kind of layers of generation gaps. So her parents kind of they make Spanish food sometimes and they speak Spanish, but they're not raising their children in that way. Their children are just kind of typical American teenagers. Whereas her grandfather, her paternal grandfather, is very much of the belief that she needs to be true to her roots and she needs to call herself Carolina, and it speaks to her in Spanish. So that was really nice. There's basically a story within this story. So there's that story of Carol not wanting to spend her summer away from her friends with this old man who she's never met and is sort of afraid of because she's heard all this stuff about Alzheimer's and about how people can become angry and lash out and that kind of thing. But then there's a story within this, which is the story her grandfather tells her. He weaves this story about the past, about a time before the drought in the desert, about a young man with his name and a young woman with Carol's late grandmother's name. And it all becomes very tied in to what's happening in the present, and all these stories sort of seem to collide. So Carol is figuring that out. She's figuring out her grandfather in this new strange place, and in turn learning about herself and her roots. This is just a lovely story. If I'm to make a confession, I have about 30 pages left, so I haven't finished it, but I wanted to film this video. But apart from the last 30 pages, I can really recommend this. I wanted this video to be quick, but I know I'm going to talk about this book for ages. This is Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill, published by Quercus. That's probably not how you say that. This came out in June 2014, and she has another book that came out last year called Asking For It, which everybody loves. But I got this for Christmas, so I really wanted to read it. I wanted to start with this one. This is set in a dystopian world where girls are bred. They're created in a lab, and from the age of 4 to the age of 16 they go to the school. They're not educated. They're taught about how to be one of three things. They can be a companion, which is like a wife. They can be a concubine, which is like a mistress that a man will have as well as a wife, or they can be a chastity, which are like the teachers at the school, and they're essentially nuns. And Louise O'Neill, I'm sure, had an Irish kind of school upbringing, so that all makes sense. Basically, these girls want to be companions, and at the age of 16, in their final year of this school, they get chosen by boys around their age, and all they're concerned with is being beautiful, being slim, being good company to men, not being too loud, not getting upset, not showing emotions, blah blah blah. Okay, so Margaret Atwood kind of vibes. They're constantly getting critiqued on their appearance and competing with one another, and that's all they know, and that's how they've bred to be, and that's how this society they have survives. They create mothers and they create women who can be totally sexually used for whatever things the men want to do to them, or you can be a chastity, which none of them want to be, because that's just an ugly thing to be. There's humour in this. It plays on a lot of the fears we maybe have about how far a patriarchal society can go, like how far we can go if girls are judged on their looks and they're taught that being pretty is important. I like this, but I struggled with it. I think maybe I struggled with it because it's first person. Okay, so there's two main characters, Frida and Isabel. Frida is who we see everything through her eyes, and she's 16, she's in her final year. There's all these girls around her, but she has a best friend, and her best friend is Isabel. And suddenly at the beginning of this novel, so we never really get to know what their friendship was like before, but Isabel becomes really distant and different, and then she gains weight, which is like the worst thing you can do in this world they live in. And I think maybe I wanted to hear from Isabel, because Frida is really mean, and they're bred to be mean. They're supposed to be mean. First person narratives are always going to have voices missing, and sometimes you really notice that and sometimes you don't, and in this book I noticed it. So they wake up in the morning and they go into this dressing thing, right? It's like all computer touchy touch, and they decide what outfit they're going to wear. Like they see catwalk models and then they pick, and then the outfit just kind of poof appears on their body, and their makeup gets blown onto their face, like that gun thing they invented in The Simpsons once. Anywho, and they have this talking wardrobe thing, and it styles their hair and everything. So it's really futuristic in terms of technology, and it's not uncommon for things like your wardrobe to talk to you. And then Frida walks into the canteen where they all eat their meals, and it's very important that they choose the right type of food to keep the right type of body so that they can please men. Anyway, and there's this line in it which is like, she spoke to the breakfast buffet as if it was going to answer back. And I'm like, but it could answer back, because you've just created this world where inanimate objects do judge you and tell you things, so why is it so hilarious and out there that the breakfast table thing could talk? I don't know, there were weird things that were kind of anachronistic, which is the wrong word, but I mean things from our time and our vocabulary in this totally other space kind of jolt with you. They make you kind of go, oh, that's strange. I 100% overthink these things. Anyway, it's a feminist book, and I think it's good for teenagers because it sort of hands you the symbolism and the imagery. It hands them to you. For example, all the names in this book, all the pronouns aren't capitalized, so Frida is with a lowercase f, and that to me anyway symbolizes that they're objects, they're not people, they're just things, and they can be used and passed around as things. I'm really not sure about the last sort of 20-30 pages. Just kind of lost me a little bit. I'd be really interested if you've read it to know what you thought of the latter page. I think I was a little bit disappointed by the ending. I wasn't expecting them to kind of release the shackles of this patriarchy and run out into freedom, because the entire world, it's not just this school, the entire world has done this to women, that women have those 3 roles to aspire to. That's all I have to say. Let me know if you've read any of them. Links for the books below, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!